What's up, guys? Welcome to a special video today where we are going to be going through every NFL team. This is my 2024 NFL season preview, where I will give you a prediction on every team's win total. We'll go through what I like, what I don't like about each team, any futures we find value on. It's going to be a lot of fun. I've been looking forward to making this for a while now, but it's going to be a longer video, right? So, you know, grab some snacks, grab a drink, whatever. Listen to this audio. You don't have to look at my face the whole time. But we're going to be here for a while because I'm going through all the teams. But it's going to be fun. I'm going to try to pack as much information as I can into this and try to keep it, as short as I possibly can. But we are going through every team, so it's going to take a while. So now, just in terms of the format, because this is my first time doing this, we're just going to be. I'll mention a couple of high level things to start, and then we're just going to go. We're going to just run them off alphabetically. And I'm going to go through each team. I'll give you their posted win totals, what the current lines are, and how I would bet them, and what I like about each team, what I don't like, etc. So, and what I think you can expect from this season just in general. So, it's going to be a lot of fun. Before we get into that, we just put out our NFL season-long pass. It's the Gridiron Pass. It's now live, lockandcash.com/gridiron for those of you interested. Now, this was our most popular pass by far last year, so we brought it back. It was very, very successful for us. And it's basically going to get you everything we release. It's an all-inclusive, all-access pass. So every future, every pick, every prop, long shot for all sports from the moment you buy till there is a Super Bowl champion. So it just locks you in. It's not like segmented by sports. It's everything that we release, every pick that we bet, until there's a Super Bowl champion. So until the end of the season. So people like that because it locks you in for a long time. You don't have to worry about any recurring payments, anything like that. You're just locked in. And you receive the daily reports every single day. Now, I'll mention that on this Gridiron Pass, last 3 years in the NFL, 2021 plus 22.87 units, 2022 plus 13.19 units, 2023 last season plus 19.36 units. And remember, this is also a football pass. This includes college football. So last 3 years in college football, 9.31 units, 18.37 units, last year 7.26 units. So a total, our last 3 years overall in football, college and NFL, total of 90.36 units to the green. So that just gives you an idea of what you can expect in terms of performance from this pass. And like I said, if you're interested, lockandcash.com/gridiron. It gets you the NFL futures that I've already released. We've released 7 of them, the full NFL season through the Super Bowl, the full college football season, the MLB playoffs that are coming up, NBA, NHL, anything we've released for that, UFC, WNBA. So you get pretty much everything. So go check that out if you're interested. And the last thing before we get into it is I want to rattle off all of the sources that I use. This is something that I don't see a lot of people do. They'll come on, they'll make videos, they'll make short form, long form videos, whatever, and they'll just spit out systems and trends and data, but they won't say where they got them from. And I don't think that's always fair. So I'm just going to run off a bunch of the sources that I used to get all of this info that I'm going to give you in this video. Let's just go through them really quick. PFF, Pro Football Reference, ESPN, NFL, Action Network, Bet Lab, Sports Insights, Killer Sports, Sports Betting Dime, Scores and Odds, RotoWire, Team Rankings, OddsShark, Sports Odds History, Betting Data, Covers, Vegas Insider, Sharp Football Analysis, and CBS Sports. So those are the main ones that I use for all the stuff that you're going to get in this video. So the first thing I want to mention is Underdogs and why I think they're going to be profitable early in the season. I'm going to take you guys back a few years. All right, let's go back to 2017. Through the first 6 weeks of the season, which is usually when the public gets killed, right? They come in, they think they're hot. They think they know what they're doing with the NFL, and those underdogs just win a ton of games outright. The good teams start off slow. 2017, dogs through the first 6 weeks covered at a rate of 60.2%. And in 2018, it was 57%. We'll throw up the numbers here. In 2019, 60%, then 55, 54.8, 59.3. And then we get to last year, and they cover through the first 6 weeks at a rate of 44.8%. Okay, this was a massive down year for those first 6 weeks. This is what we call a big outlier year. 2023 was. All right, I think you could, if you look at that, obviously that trend, I think you can expect that to come back in 2024. So me personally, in the first month specifically of the season, I'm going to be looking for lots of live underdogs. So just keep that in mind. The public did really well last season, all right? It was a great public year. Don't expect that to happen again is all I would say, okay? So just be a little bit more careful. You might want to come in and think all the good teams are going to cover. They're great. The favorites did really well last year. The dogs are going to come back this season. That's my first prediction, all right? Now, one thing I want to mention about penalties, I got this question a lot, which is why I'm going to bring it up. The hip drop tackle is now a penalty. I don't think it's really going to impact the game much. It could be a little bit difficult to officiate. Like if a guy grabs the hips but doesn't actually bring him all the way down, halfway, let's go. Like there's some nuance that's going to be involved in it, but I think this is more of a, the NFL tends to do these things where they change up rules for the player safety, but in reality, it's kind of just for like PR. It's kind of like the appearance of player safety. I don't really think they care that much about it. And I think that this might be a thing maybe early in the first few weeks, and then it'll just die off as if it gets too excessive. So I wouldn't worry too much about the hip drop tackle, but that is a question that I got several times. Okay, so with all that being said, let's get into the teams. We're going to be starting it off alphabetically with the Arizona Cardinals. Now, I have in this spreadsheet in front of me, right, I have 32 tabs, and I have a little tagline I wrote down for each team, kind of like if I could describe this team in one sentence, what would it be? And for the Cardinals, I have written down, this might be the worst defense in the NFL. All right, it's pretty bad. I'm gonna rattle off some numbers. Now let's start off with some good stuff though. All right, we'll talk about last year first actually. So last year they went 4-13 straight up, but 9-8 against the spread, and that's really what we care about here, right? They missed the playoffs. Their number now is sitting at 6.5 for this season. So the odds makers expecting a bit of improvement for Arizona. Now, a good thing, James Conner got healthy towards the end of last season, and he came on pretty strong. He's obviously going to start this year. Hopefully he gets in a full healthy year. He's a pretty good running back when healthy. Now, the front office tried to bolster the defense in the offseason. You got Sean Murphy-Bunting, Mack Wilson, Darius Robinson. But I'll explain to you in a second why it's still pretty bad. But I like the head coach. That's the last pro that I've written down here. I think promising young head coach, Jonathan Gannon. I think he did a good job last year. Solid play calling, solid in terms of aggressiveness, and I think they won some games that they shouldn't have won because of him. So I think they're doing decent in terms of their head coach. Now, like I said, the defense is a big issue. Okay, the offense is going to be challenging for their opponents because they should be able to put up some points. This should be a somewhat dynamic offense with Kyler Murray running the show, but they were 32nd in EPA per pass allowed, 31st in EPA per rush allowed last season, 32nd in EPA per play allowed overall. They were only one of 3 teams last year to allow more than 6 yards per play to their opponents. So even with the additions on defense, this is still a horrendous unit. And then a big question is just, can Kyler Murray stay healthy, right? He hasn't really been able to for a few years now. So I need to see him stay healthy, play a full season. And honestly, even when he does, his metrics are not great either. Bottom 3 amongst eligible quarterbacks in EPA per attempt, yards per attempt, completion rate, passer rating when healthy. So this is not exactly an elite quarterback. I think he's just good, but he's not great enough to bring them to where they want to be. And like I said, the defense is going to be a huge problem. Last thing I'll know, the defense is going to play this season the number 1 projected offensive schedule, meaning their opponents. The collection of offenses that they're going to play throughout the entire season is ranked it's currently projected as first. Obviously, these things can change, but they're basically going to play a lot of good offensive teams, and I think they're going to give up a ton of points. So for my lean, I like the under 6.5 here. I went through the schedule. I couldn't find 7 wins, and you get a plus money on this. The under 6.5 is plus 145. So that's where I would lean for Arizona. All right. And obviously to not make the playoffs. Okay, the Falcons. What do I have written down? Listen, the Falcons 7-10 last year, 5-12 against the spread. They didn't make the playoffs. Okay, I expect them to make the playoffs this year. And I'll be honest, if the Falcons don't win the NFC South, the season will have been a disappointment. But like bottom line, they're set up so nicely here to win a weak division and get themselves a home playoff game. I'd be stunned if they don't do it. All right, I love the addition of Kirk Cousins, even coming off the injury. I love them getting Zach Robinson as their offensive coordinator from the Rams. The additions to the wide receiving core with Darnell Mooney, Rondale Moore to go along with Drake London, Kyle Pitts, the 2 backs they have. I mean, they've got a ton of offensive weapons. And also, even though it was clowned at the time, drafting Michael Penix Jr. is sort of a safety net. I mean, you don't know what Kirk Cousins, as a slightly older quarterback coming off of an Achilles tear, you don't know how durable he's going to be. So they even have somebody that at least can come in and throw the ball well. You know he can play. So I like that too. It's kind of like a little safety net. The defense was good last year. Should take another step forward this year. But here's the big thing. They play the easiest schedule right now projected overall in the NFL. And not only that, but they play the easiest projected schedule of rushing defenses with a top 5 offensive line, Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algiers. 2 very good running backs. One you can argue could be great in Robinson. A great offensive line, and they're going to be playing a bunch of bad rushing defenses and the weakest schedule overall. Really, the only thing I could say negative about this team is that the new coaching, maybe needs time to gel. Getting Raheem Morris in there, he's not going to be doing what Arthur Smith was trying to do last season. And the other thing is probably just needing to utilize all your weapons effectively. Like, you have so many guys that you can give the ball to now. How do you make sure everyone's involved? How do you make sure you're being efficient with all these guys? A lot of talent on offense. They did lose. I have a con listed here. They did lose a lot of their sacks from last season with Calais Campbell gone, Bud Dupree gone. But I trust the defense. I trust the defensive coordinator, Jimmy Lake. I think they're going to be able to find ways to replace that. All right. And they still have a really good secondary. So for the Falcons, I think this one is pretty simple. Over 9.5 wins. It's sitting around -130, -135. That's where I would lean if I was going to play it. I would like to get the odds a little bit better, maybe -115, -120, but it is what it is. For the purposes of the video, I'd go over 9.5 on the Falcons. All right, now we move on to Baltimore. Last season was disappointing for the Ravens. All right, I think Lamar Jackson has to take the next step. And I don't mean the next step like, getting to the AFC Championship game like he did last year. I don't even mean the next step as in taking your team potentially to the Super Bowl. I just mean he's got to take the next step as a passer in these huge games. He has to be able to win huge games when nothing else is going right for him, and he doesn't seem like he's been able to do that so far. All right, now listen, he's great. They went 13 games, 13-4 straight up last season, 11-6 against the spread, got to the AFC Championship game, lost to the Chiefs, no shame in that, but Lamar is in his prime, and you don't know how long he's going to be in his prime. Now, the good things about this team, last 5 years, when Lamar starts, 52-18. I mean, the guy just wins, all right? Without him, they're 4-9. They added Derrick Henry. Here's the thing. They lost 2 backs, right? And they added in Dobbins and Edwards. Now they add Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is not what he once was, but he's still a very, very good running back behind a really solid offensive line and a very, very good rushing scheme in general. This has been a great team in terms of running the football. Very balanced, a great head coach, obviously. And they got a little scheduling quirk for them this year. The Ravens will have the most rest edges in the entire NFL. So they'll have the most games played where they have a rest edge against their opponent. So that's interesting. But the opponents themselves are pretty tough. They're going to play the 5th hardest schedule right now, currently projected as the 5th hardest schedule. Henry needs to stay healthy, right? You always wonder about backs getting into their 30s. Can they stay healthy? He's got to be healthy as the primary back. The offensive line has to stay healthy. That's something we saw last year. Got to keep those guys out there. The wide receiving core, one of the things that I'm a little bit worried about, right? We saw it wasn't really a problem until it was in the playoffs. Other than after Zay Flowers, there's a pretty big drop-off in terms of targets for Lamar Jackson. So I would worry about that a little bit. And maybe the new coaching, right? Needs time to gel. They have a new defensive coordinator, new defensive backs coach, defensive line coach. So all of that will take time, but I like the way this team is headed. I like the trajectory of the team. The number's sitting at 10.5, and I don't really see any reason you would not take the over here. I think over 10.5 for the Ravens is solid. I don't feel like super strongly about this one either way. It's -110. I think the number is about correct when I looked at their schedule. But I think I would lean I would lean over on this. But the big thing for me here this season, because this is a Super Bowl contending team. So the big thing for me is Lamar has to take the next step for the Ravens to get to where they want to be. Now we'll take a look at the Buffalo Bills. Okay, 11-6 straight up last season, 7-10 against the spread, and they lost in the AFC divisional round to the Kansas City Chiefs. Really tough loss for the Bills last season. It kind of seemed like everything was lining up for them, right? They came on strong at the end of the year, stole the division from the Dolphins. You get a home game. You got 2 home games. You even have a lead at home against the Chiefs in the playoffs. I mean, you're at halftime exactly where you want to be, and they couldn't close it out. I mean, part of that is the greatness of Patrick Mahomes and that Chiefs defense, but part of that is just the Bills just not being able to get over the hump. Now, things I like about this team, they faced a lot of adversity last season, and I think that's going to be very good experience, specifically for Josh Allen, right? All of the injuries they had on defense, them trying to get the running game more involved. It came with some hurdles, it came with some growing pains, but it was overall, I think, a good experience for them to go through that and still come out winning the division and getting to the divisional round. The running game was more of a focal point, which I liked, and I think that will continue this season. They have to continue that this season for them to be successful. But one thing that I'll say is the loss of Stephon Diggs is not really a big deal. Everyone's going to overblow it, but if you look at Josh Allen's numbers, his metrics like EPA per play, yards per play, without Diggs, they're still excellent. So I think he'll be able to make use of the weapons that he has. I think they'll be able to replace the Diggs' production. They still have a couple of great tight ends with Knox and Kincaid, and they have gotten, they've been really successful with running those 2 tight end sets, especially in the red zone. Watch out for that. So I think they're going to be fine with that. And they added, they don't have the skill, right? They don't have the amount of skill that Stephon Diggs had, but they had a lot of depth at wide receiver, and depth is still good because guys get hurt. This is a physical league, so who did they add? They had Mac Hollins, Chase Claypool, MVS, Curtis Samuel. They drafted Keon Coleman from FSU, who I think is going to be really good too. And all these guys are big, big, tall guys that can. Josh Allen's going to be throwing up a lot of balls. They can go up and get them. I think that's solid. Now on the other side, top 10 schedule in terms of difficulty of opponents. They did lose a bunch of players at the skill positions. They're taking a huge dead cap hit as well. $61 million to non-players this year for the Bills, so it might limit their ability to make moves throughout the season. And the biggest issue for me is the secondary. The secondary was gutted. It's been revamped. They're going to play a lot of difficult offenses if you look at their schedule. They're going to play Mahomes this year. They're going to play Lamar this year during the regular season. The secondary has to figure something out. Otherwise, the defense, I think, could potentially take a small step back. But I actually think the offense is going to be just fine. I think they'll be firing on all cylinders. And I think because of the loss of Diggs and because of all the things I just said, you're getting plus money on an over 10.5 for the Buffalo Bills, and that's where I would lean. It's plus 130. I would lean to that over 10.5 when I look at their schedule. So I think I'm just not as worried as other people are about Buffalo with the losses on offense. I think you're going to just see how good Josh Allen is. You give him a couple of guys that can run routes, that can catch the ball. He's going to make things happen. So lean over 10.5, plus 130 for Buffalo. Carolina Panthers are a popular pick right now to go over their win total, which is sitting at 5.5 right now. It actually opened at 4.5, and it caught a bunch of steam. That's how popular it's been. It's went up a full win. 2-15 last season. Worst team in the NFL, 4-11-2 against the spread. They missed the playoffs. Now, a couple things they did good. They did improve the offensive line through free agency, which was a huge problem last season. All right, and they're playing a much easier schedule this year. They're going to play the 26th projected defensive schedule and the 23rd projected offensive schedule. So they should be improved on both sides of the ball. Another year for the young QB, Bryce Young, to new head coach now, new offensive coordinator. Okay, let's see what can happen. What are the bad sides of the Carolina Panthers? This is just a bad franchise, right? We know who the owner is. We know what he's like. Generally not a good dude. The head coach is unproven. The quarterback is, you want to say positive about the quarterback, but he looked awful as a rookie. I mean, he looked atrocious. There's a chance that he's just simply not good. There is a legit chance that Bryce Young is just not good as an NFL quarterback. So that is something that concerns me, even though I think they could be better this year. It is something that I think about. And because even when he was protected last season, he was bottom 5 in accuracy, bottom 5 in yards per attempt, even in a clean pocket. So I have some concerns. Now, the 4.5, I understood. I get that. People wanting to bet the over on that because they were so bad last season. It can't get any worse, rock bottom. But now that the number's gone up, I look at the schedule. 2 wins to get to 6. I can't see a 4-win improvement here. I just don't see it. So for me, I think you got value now that this has moved up on the under. I think this is legitimately, the Panthers could win 4 or 5 games. Under 5.5 is plus 102. That's where I would go here. And like I said, if they win 4, let's say if they win 5 games, that's a 3-win improvement. That's going to be considered I don't say success, but it's progress for a new coach, young quarterback. Oh, we won 2 wins. We got 2 wins last year. We got 5 wins this year. It's considered a good season. It's progress. But they would still go under this win total, and I just can't see them getting to 6 wins here with this roster and with the makeup of this team right now against this schedule. I don't see 6 wins. So I would lean under 5.5 at plus 102 for the Panthers. All right, the Chicago Bears have a win total of 9, even right now. Sitting at plus 110 to the over, minus 110 to the under, or sorry, minus 120 to the under. All right, last year they won 7 games, 7-10 straight up. They went 8-7-2 against the spread, and they did not make the playoffs. Obviously, the big news for them, getting the first pick in the draft, taking Caleb Williams. And listen, I know you can find people on both sides of this argument. I personally think that Caleb Williams is going to make an immediate impact for the Bears. All right, now, how strong that will be, I don't know. I don't know if he's going to propel them to competing for the division, a wild card spot. I don't know, but I think he's going to make them better. All right, I do think he's going to make them better. I think he's better than Justin Fields. I think he's better than the options they had last year at quarterback. All right, he's going to make an immediate impact. They made major upgrades at wide receiver. Okay, they have lots of weapons now. This is to an offense that was already excellent in the red zone last year. They were a pretty good red zone offense last season. I think Eberflus is a decent head coach. I don't hate him, and I think he'll be improved. Another year under his belt. Really good secondary. Now, they got to find ways to generate pressure up front. That's something that I don't love, but really good secondary. And here's the big thing. They play the third easiest schedule right now projected. So a lot of what you'll see in this video, you've already seen it, but a repetitive theme is going to be looking at teams' schedule because it's very, very important. All right, now on the other side, the offensive line, it's got to get better. All right, last year they were not great. They were not able to stay healthy up front on both sides of the ball, offensive and defensive line. That's got to improve this season. Now, a lot of times when you see teams get injured a lot one year or they rank really low in health, that tends to regress back in their favor the following season. So we'll see if that happens. But they only had 30 sacks last year. That's incredibly low over 17 games. They were 30th in pressure rate. That has to improve. Now, they did not do much there to improve it, but you hope maybe some of these guys that they have progress and they find ways to generate pressure because you have to. In this league, you got to get pressure on the quarterback. But with all that being said, getting Caleb Williams, Eberflus, who I think is a decent head coach, the third easiest schedule, the new weapons they have at wide receiver, I got to go over 9 here for the Bears. I got to go over 9 at plus 110. I look at the schedule. I think I can find 9 wins. And if you want to, listen, I'm not going to say, I'm not looking, I haven't bet it, and I'm not currently looking at it, but let me pull it up and see what this divisional future number is. If I look at the NFC North, you've got the Lions favored at plus 140, who I would expect to win it. We'll get to the Packers later. They're plus 200, but we'll get to later on why I think that's not a great number. Then you got the Bears at plus 300. That could be a sprinkle right there. If you don't want to go for the favorite, which is Detroit, go for the Bears. Skip the Packers, my opinion. Go for the Bears plus 300 to try to win this division. That would be maybe something I look at. But I think over 9 at plus 110 is a solid look for them with all of the things that I mentioned. So over 9 at plus 110 for the Chicago Bears. Next up, the Cincinnati Bengals. They're sitting with a win total of 10.5. The big thing for them is just health, right? We saw what happened with Joe Burrow last season. They finished 9-8. Were somehow able to stay in the playoff race. They were 7-8-2 against the spread, and they missed the playoffs, although they were in it until the very end. They did face a brutal schedule last season, and they were able to get 9 wins with all the basically a makeshift offense. But I can't lie. Even though we're going to come into this new season, Joe Burrow is supposed to be healthy, I'm still concerned about the health of Joe Burrow, right? Like I don't know what's going on with that leg, with that wrist. I gotta see him play, and I gotta see him stay healthy for me to buy in on this team as Super Bowl contenders, which is what most people seem to think they are. They got there a few years ago, didn't get the job done. Since then, haven't been able to get back. But for me to believe that they can get back to that level, I gotta see him stay healthy for an extended period of time. Faced a really tough schedule last season. They're going to get a break this season. 6th easiest schedule so far projected for 2024. Now, they have what I like to call the trifecta, which is rare. You have an elite as long as everyone's healthy, elite quarterback, elite head coach, and an elite defensive coordinator. That is rare, but they have all 3. Okay. And they managed 9 wins last year with so many injuries, barely a quarterback, brutal schedule. They were in it to the very end. Zach Taylor is just a phenomenal head coach. And I think having him is huge. Now, on the defensive side of the ball is where I start to get a little bit concerned. They lost DJ Reader, and, it's football. One guy doesn't make or break you as a team, but they were the number 1 rushing defense last year with DJ Reader, and they were dead last when he didn't play. They're going to have to figure this out without him. Otherwise, teams are going to run the ball all over them, especially up the middle where he usually is. And that's just going to be a huge problem if they don't figure that out. Now, their schedule overall, like I said, 6th easiest schedule for 2024, but The rest, right? Because remember, strength of schedule is based on opponents, but the rest is a little bit of an issue for them. They play 3 short week road games. That's the most in the NFL. And in week 15 through 15, 16, 17, they're going to play 3 games in 10 days. So could be a rough end to the season for the Bengals. I think they need to stack their wins up front. They need to be a front-heavy team. Lost Mixon, so the running back core is a bit weaker. Secondary is also a bit thinner. I got some questions for them on defense, a little bit concerned there. Like I said, my big thing, though, is the health of Joe Burrow. For me, I looked at their schedule, and we'll throw up each schedule on the screen as we go along here. I lean under 10.5. I think this could very well be a 9-win team just like last year, or a 10-win team that competes for a playoff spot or grabs a wild card spot. Give me the under 10.5 at plus 120 for the Bengals. The Cleveland Browns have a number posted of 8.5, which kind of surprised me a little bit. I got to be honest. They won 11 games last season, 11-6. They were 10-6-1 against the spread. They were a money printing machine last season. They made it to the playoffs, lost in the wild card round to the Houston Texans. But to be honest, this number is just straight up disrespectful. Like 8.5. For a team that had the number 1 defense, arguably in the NFL last season, and probably will have the number 1 defense again this year, and won 11 games last season with essentially no quarterback. They ranked 27th, guys, in health last season. So the injuries were just so bad, and they still had the best defense overall. Chubb, we saw what happened with the Nick Chubb injury, was brutal. He'll be back. When top to bottom on this roster, you could say they have the most talent in the NFL. An elite roster, elite offensive line, the best front 7 in football. Maybe you want to make the argument they regress a little bit after winning 11 games last season. They probably should not have won 11 games. But I still think this is an above 500 team, because if you're taking this under 8.5 that's in the market right now, you're basically saying you think this is a below 500 team, and I don't think that's true. Now, I will say, tough schedule for 2024. Okay, one of the projected toughest schedules. Either, based on the source, it's either second or third in terms of how difficult their schedule is. And yes, the passing offense needs to improve this season. They have horrendous passing numbers from last season, but remember, they basically didn't have a quarterback. Playing rookies here and there. Deshaun Watson was hurt most of the year. Watson needs to stay healthy, and he needs to play well. He doesn't have to be the Houston Texans Deshaun Watson that was unbelievable and stellar. He just has to be a serviceable, good quarterback with that defense, and you're going to win games. And the reason why he has to do that is because his contract's a huge cap hit. I mean, that's a horrible contract, so they can't really go through the season and then add pieces when they want. He's got to play well. Maybe, like I said, the regression thing earlier, they did go 5-0 in games that were decided by a field goal or less. They were 6-2 in one-possession games, so I get that. I'm a contrarian bettor. I get maybe saying that will regress, come back the other way. They probably did overperform a little bit, but I still, like I said, is this a 500 team or not, right? They're either finishing 8 or 9 or 9 and 8, 10 and 7, whatever. But do you think this is an above 500 team? I do. The over 8.5 is minus 140, and that's where I would lean here. Even with the brutal schedule, you have a great defense. You have a really good head coach. You have a quarterback that hopefully stays healthy. The best front 7 in football. I would go over 8.5. and eat the juice at minus 140 for the Cleveland Browns. All right, guys, on to the Dallas Cowboys. We are rolling here. We are getting through. I think we're on team, 9 or 10 here. Cowboys went 12-5 straight up last season, 10-7 against the spread, had a really good year, got to the playoffs, but got destroyed in the wild card round at home. Very bad playoff loss to the Packers. Now, they come back this season, their total sitting at 9.5. We know the usual people here, Mike McCarthy, Dak Prescott. Listen, when I think of the Cowboys, the first thing I think of is that this is like a truly elite offense. You don't have to go through any numbers or jump through any hoops to get them, to seem great. This is a great offense. All right, it's one of the best in the NFL, one of the best red zone offenses in the NFL. I think they were 5th last season. Easily top 10 quarterback, right? Super Bowl winning head coach. Very strong front 7 on defense. Their secondary should be better this year. So a lot of things to like about the Cowboys, but really the only thing that's holding them back is that the Cowboy shtick is just getting old, right? Like it's beat up on the bad teams. It's fall short against the really good teams, and it's make the playoffs and then just get eliminated, right? I mean, like they've got to get over the hump, similar to what I was talking about earlier with the Ravens. But I think it's even worse with the Cowboys. Now, they will have a harder schedule this season. I think that's going to be really important. They played a guys, go back and look, very easy schedule last year to get those 12 wins. They're going to play a much harder schedule, a top 10 schedule this season in terms of difficulty. The defense also, remember, all the pick sixes last year, all the turnover luck, the defense scored, and the special team scored a bunch of touchdowns last season. I think that to me is one of the things that easily will regress. You can talk about quarterbacks overperforming, like a rookie coming in. That might not always regress. I think turnover luck is the biggest thing I look for, and the Cowboys had a bunch of it last year. All right, they've had a double-digit turnover margin now for 3 straight seasons. I can't see it happening. I know the defense is good. Part of that is defense being good, but part of that is luck, and I just can't see that happening again. So I predict they'll have some regression in that department. They do have new pieces on defense, a new defensive coordinator, Mike Zimmer, with Quinn leaving, so that's going to take time to maybe adjust. Offensive line, still not great. So got to protect Dak, very important, and obviously the running back situation is not great there either. Don't have a great rushing attack. But like I said, I think the biggest thing with the Cowboys is they're going to play a harder schedule this year. So this shtick of beating up on the bad teams and not showing up against the good teams, I think it's going to finally run its course, and I think they're going to hit a wall this year. So I think there's good value. Okay, again, these are not all official bets, but I think you got value on under 9.5 for the Cowboys at plus 130. All right, it's plus money. I think it's very realistic when I look at this schedule that we're going to put up here that you go from 12 wins to 9 wins. I think that's the value play. You don't want to eat all this juice for the over, right? I mean, they might get there, but it's a much tougher schedule. I think under 9.5 for the Cowboys, plus 130, that's the best bet. That's the way I would go. Next up, the Denver Broncos, 8-9 straight up last season, 6-10-1 against the spread. One of the weaker against the spread teams in the NFL, although they did win a bunch of games. Missed the playoffs, but it was a promising. I mean, to win 8 games with all the crap that was going on with Denver last season is promising, and part of that was Russell Wilson, but he is now gone. Okay, what are we? They're total sitting at 5.5, by the way. What do we have to look forward to if you're a Broncos fan? You're going to be playing the 4th easiest projected schedule of offenses, so your defense should have a good season. Okay, your defense should have a solid year. Got Javonte Williams in the backfield, fresh start, new season, help from Jaleel McLaughlin, who was pretty good last year, came on late. You've got a quarterback problem, right? You got a quarterback problem. You got young talent there in Bo Nix. You got Jarrett Stidham, who we've seen play before, and you've got Zach Wilson, who I know as a Jets fan is awful. So you've got to figure out what to do at the quarterback position. Now, I don't know if they're going to name him the starter, but I think eventually this will be Nix's job. Bo Nix will start. And I think he fits. He'll fit. Like, he seems like the type of quarterback that would fit Sean Payton's system pretty well. The problem is, though, they don't really have many weapons on offense. All right, I know they got some decent receivers, but just you don't look at them as a scary offensive attack. Russell Wilson was able to make some plays last season, but overall, they're not a great offense. Now, on the other side, the front seven is a massive issue for the Broncos. Okay, they were really bad at generating pressure last season. I think they're going to be really bad at doing that again this year. They kind of were carried by the linebacking and the secondary, but I think the front seven is going to be one of the worst in the NFL once again. They also had the highest turnover luck in the league. We just talked about this with Dallas. Denver was first. All right, they were 8-1 last season, all 8 of their wins when they won the turnover battle. And they were 0-8 when they did not win the turnover battle. So their success relied heavily on forcing turnovers and not turning the ball over. All right, now, why do I bring that up? Because you're going to have either Stidham, Zach Wilson, or a rookie Bo Nix. You're going to turn the ball over. All right, so I think that's going to be a challenge for the Broncos. Now, their offensive schedule, though, like I mentioned before, is going to be easy. So the defense should have a good year. But they're going to face some tough defenses, all right, specifically pass rushers, which could be a problem. But my big thing is everyone's talking about Caleb Williams. Everyone's talking about Jane Daniels. Watch out for Bo Nix this season. I think he could maybe, right, with the guidance and the leadership of a good veteran head coach, I think he could maybe step into this system and have some success. So for me, this number is just a little low. Like, it's even on both sides. I would go over 5.5 at minus 105, right? Because remember, I'm just looking at these numbers and I'm trying to find value, and I'm saying if I had to go one way, if I had to pick on the Broncos, I would say I'll take a bet that Bo Nix surprises some people, plays well, and their defense is good enough to keep them in and steal some games. That's what I would bet on when I look at the Denver Broncos. So I'd go over 5.5 at -105. On to the Detroit Lions, who had a very successful 2023 season. All right, 12-5 straight up, 12-5 against the spread. That's what I'm talking about. I like teams that do that. Got to the NFC Championship game, played a really good game, ended up losing to the 49ers, had a big lead, blew it. Unfortunate, but overall, without a shadow of a doubt, very successful season. Dan Campbell's done a great job. Jared Goff with Ben Johnson, just really, really good things that you're seeing from the Detroit Lions. And they've done things to improve. We'll talk about that. So they were an incredibly efficient offense last season, and they added key pieces to plug up their holes, right? They added pieces to the secondary via the trade and the draft. So that'll improve their passing defense to go along with one of the best rushing defenses in the NFL, and that's very important. I'm going to get to that in a second. Last year was not fluky or lucky, which is something I like. When I dived into the Lions metrics and their turnover luck and all those things, there wasn't a lot of luck involved. It was pure skill. They were beating teams that they should beat. They were competing with good teams. They had a really good, strong year. All right. They even actually had a negative, like for example, they were 28th in fumble luck, right? They underperformed in terms of pressure rate. With the guys they have up front, they should be generating more pressure. They played a pretty tough schedule when you look at it, and they still had a great season. This year, they're gonna be playing a bottom 5 schedule in terms of their opponents' defenses. So expect the offense to play really well this season. And remember, what do we know about the Lions? The Lions are an elite indoor offense. They're going to play 14 of their 17 games this season in a dome, indoors. So that's your 8 home games plus 6 more on the road, but in a dome. That's huge for the Lions to stay indoors. And by the way, their outdoor games, they're not even that bad. I think they get Green Bay early in the season, so no snow or anything like that. One of them is San Fran, so nice weather out there. I think the other one is, I think it's Chicago or, yeah, it's the Bears because of the division. So the other one's the Bears. So really, you got a good shot here with the Lions. And I think, honestly, when I look at everything, we'll talk about the Niners later, when I look at how I think their season's going to go, look at some other contenders like the Cowboys, the Eagles, I think the Lions are going to contend for the Super Bowl again this year. All right, I think they're going to be really good. I think they would be, as of right now, tentatively, they would be my pick to win the NFC, but that doesn't mean anything. I'm not betting it in any way. But I really like the trajectory for the Lions. Now, we need to see if Dan Campbell can replicate that success, right? Because a lot of times you have a coach, they come in, and he's been there for a few years now, but they finally break through, they have that success, and then it's really hard to maintain it. The great ones can maintain it. So we have to see if they can do that. They've got the new pieces that I mentioned earlier on defense, so those guys have got to get acclimated and get into the mix. Also, their second half numbers need to improve. You saw this in the NFC Championship game. Built that big lead in the first half, gave it all back in the second half, lost the game. Their second half numbers dipped considerably last season. They need to get those back up and play a more steady game throughout. They need to finish games stronger, and the new look secondary has to play well. Right? I mean, they were 31st in yards per pass attempt last season. Secondary was their biggest issue. They got to play better this season. But I think, listen, like I said, I think they've made the right moves. They've put the pieces in place. Now it's just about execution. They've got the favorable schedule. They've got all those indoor games. This number sitting at 10.5, over 10.5 at -125 for the Lions. That's where I would go for Detroit. The Green Bay Packers had a really good 2023. But I'm here to tell you that the script is about to flip for Green Bay. All right, they went 9-8 last season, straight up and against the spread. Won a playoff game on the road in Dallas, and then ended up losing to the Niners in the NFC divisional round, where they had a lead. Let the Niners come back and win that game, but very competitive game. They played really well. Their numbers currently sitting at 9.5. Jordan Love found it, guys. Right, the number one thing I have written here. Jordan Love found it in the second half of last season. All right, he came on, something clicked, and he was just unstoppable. Amazing throws under pressure on his back leg, on the run. I mean, he was phenomenal. All right, they have an awesome offensive line, especially pass blocking, right? Second best team pass block win rate, third best in pressure rate allowed last season. These are things that teams would die to have, right? A young quarterback that's dynamic and throw on the run, great offensive line that's going to protect him. Really young core on offense that, again, broke through in the second half of last season. You got to see those guys do it again. They have to take another step forward together collectively as a group this season. But why is the script going to flip? They are going to play the projected second toughest schedule of 2024 compared to 25th last season. So they had a really easy schedule last year. They're going to play a really hard schedule this year, right? And sometimes you'll see teams like I mentioned with the Lions, right? If, let's say, the Packers were playing a really tough schedule this year, but they also played a really tough schedule last year, it wouldn't be that much of a concern to me. But they are going to get the shift now, right? And now the league is going to adjust. The league is going to have more tape on Jordan Love. They're going to know how to handle him a little bit better. They're also going to play on defense, right? 9 of the top 10 projected passing offenses in the NFL. So the defense is also going to have issues here. They've got problems on both sides of their schedule, offense and defense. Secondary is really good, but like I said, it's going to have their hands full with all those great passing teams. They did get Josh Jacobs to replace Aaron Jones, but Josh Jacobs is coming off a subpar year, a career low year in several of his advanced rushing metrics. And once again, they're going to play the third toughest schedule projected of rushing defenses. So this is important stuff to look at because you have to see how they match up. You can't just say, oh, Jordan Love's great. They did so well last year. They got to the playoffs. They won a game. All that does is overvalue a team for the next season. So you have to look at these things. You have to dive in, and they are set to play a very tough schedule. They were also insanely good, and I mean like anomaly good in the red zone last season. Think about this. They scored in any drive where they got to a goal-to-go situation, they scored a touchdown 95% of those drives. That is almost, if there's one thing in this video that I guarantee you will regress, it's that. That is an insane rate to score touchdowns in the red zone. That will not continue this season. I can promise you that. So for me, I don't want to eat the juice. You know how I am. And they won 9 games last season. I think it's really, really likely that they win 9 or less games again this season. So give me the under 9.5 for the Packers at plus 120. All right, on to the Houston Texans, guys. Their total is sitting at 9.5. This is a very popular team in terms of futures, in terms of going over this win total. A lot of moves in the offseason and a very, very promising team right now. My one thing for this team that I've written down, the sky's the limit for the Texans this season. All right, C.J. Stroud is, I think now you cannot argue it anymore, the most promising young quarterback in the NFL, had a phenomenal rookie year, led his team to the playoffs, won a playoff game. D'Amico Ryans and Bobby Slowick, really, really good coaching duo in terms of head coach and OC, which are very important. And even though they're going to be facing a little bit of a tougher schedule, they've gotten better, right? They've added a lot of pieces. They improved the O-line, which was dealt with a lot of injuries last year. They added Stephon Diggs. It's going to be huge for the receiving core. Joe Mixon being added in the backfield is going to be great as well. CJ Stroud's got so many weapons now. This is going to be one of, if not the best offense in football in terms of numbers, in terms of putting up touchdowns, points. It's going to be very fun to watch them play. Now on the other side, they're going to be playing better competition than they did last year. And I know that in the NFL, people like to say the sophomore slump is a thing. I don't know. I think Stroud could just be special, so we have to see if that actually happens or not. But they are projected to face, as of right now, the 10th toughest schedule of opposing quarterbacks. So the defense will have its hands full, but the defense played pretty well last season. And then, if we look at the AFC South a little bit, I project the Jaguars to be much better this year. I project the Colts to be a bit better this year. That relies on the health of Anthony Richardson, but still. Though, so you are going to have a bit of an uptick in competition in terms of in your own division. The Titans are still going to be really bad, but the other two teams are going to be improved. So you might not just get those easy divisional games this year. Pressure rate is one thing they could probably improve as I'm diving into the metrics. Kind of just middle of the road in pressure last season, but they did add personnel and they have the personnel to improve it. Overall, their schedule, I told you 10th toughest in terms of quarterbacks for their defense, but overall they're playing the 7th hardest schedule, right now projected between 6th and 7th. Hardest schedule overall in 2024. So it is going to be a bit more of a challenge. The number is sitting at 9.5. It's minus 130. I think you got to go over because just sheer talent on offense and how good Stroud looked, I think you got to go over. They won 10 games last year in his rookie season, 10-7. They were 9-8 against the spread. Good team to bet on overall. They went to the AFC divisional round, lost there. No shame in that. And I think you got to go over 9.5 here. And then let's take a look at the division because I think you have some value here. They are currently plus 105. That number came down. It was better before. I'll talk about the Jaguars later. They're next up at plus 270. But listen, it's clear that plus 105 is just they're clearly the best team in the division. I just don't see how any other team wins it. I don't see the Colts winning. I think it's a 2-team race probably between Jacksonville and Houston, and I think Houston is just the far better team. So I still think even at the plus 105, you have some value there that probably should be minus. They probably should be favored. And I think one of the interesting things you can look at is the exact. They have these. Actually, let's pull them up. They have these exact division order props, and I think this division is just really cut and dry. And I think you know what you're getting here. So let's take a look. If I go, what are the numbers here? First, this is for exact division order for the Texans to finish first, the Jaguars to finish second, followed by the Colts and the Titans. That is plus 650. And I think that's solid value because that's exactly how I see this playing out. I think the AFC, like I said, very black and white, not much gray. Houston's the best team. So right now you can get plus 650 for the order to be Houston, Jacksonville, Indy, and Tennessee. I think that's solid value as well. But in terms of the number, over 9.5 at minus 130 for the Texans. Staying in the AFC South, we have the Indianapolis Colts, who went 9-8 straight up and against the spread last season. Their win total is currently sitting at 8.5. Competed for a playoff spot all of 2023, but ended up missing out. Came up just short towards the end of the season there. But some good things to like about this team. However, the Colts do have one huge problem, which I will get to in a minute. Let's talk about what I like first. Anthony Richardson. I like him as a dual threat quarterback if he can stay healthy. Now, that is a big if based on what we've seen so far, but I think he presents like a unique kind of player that defenses have to prepare for. Big, burly, tough. If he can get better at throwing the ball, and so far it looks like at camp, it looks like he's improved his passing, then he's going to be a very dangerous weapon. Shane Steichen's a good young head coach. I like him. I think they're set there. They did a really good job with their rushing attack last year in terms of rushing schemes with Jonathan Taylor. They were top 10 in yards per carry, EPA per rush. And when they went against really good rushing defenses, they played 7 of the top 10 rushing defenses, and they went 5-2 in those games. So solid offensive line, elite running back. They even added Joe Flacco as a backup, which is going to help them if, obviously we don't want Anthony Richardson to get hurt. But if he does, because you got some concerns there, you got Flacco now as a backup who played well last year, and a really good front 7 on defense. Now, there are other holes on defense, but they're good at pressure rate. They're good at getting to the quarterback and forcing turnovers. Now, the one huge problem that I was talking about is that secondary, which was just god-awful last season. And it looks like, in terms of the projections that I'm looking at, that they're going to be, once again, a bottom 5 unit in the NFL. So they've got big holes in the back end of the defense. They also really overperformed last season. If you look at their metrics and you look at their turnover luck, the differential, and how they won games, if you go back and actually, I watch almost every game for every NFL season. So if you go back and actually look at how they won games, there was a lot of luck involved for the Colts. Richardson has to get better as a passer. He's really good as a runner, but he struggled as a passer. Turnovers, like I said, were a huge factor for them. Just to get to 9 wins, teams that have a lot of turnover luck, high turnover margin, I mentioned this already, that tends to regress the following season. And then you combine that with the fact that they're going to be playing a much tougher schedule. It's kind of this perfect storm. All these ingredients coming together for this team to experience some regression, specifically on the offensive side. They're going to play the 5th hardest schedule for the first half of the season. It gets a little bit easier in the second half, but this secondary is really bad. And I think that this is one of those teams that hinges too much. Even without him last year, Anthony Richardson, now they add Flacco as a backup, but this team hinges too much on like 2 to 3 guys, right? Richardson, Jonathan Taylor, neither of those guys have proven they can stay healthy at this point for an entire season. I know Richardson is young, it's early on, but I have to see him play a full season. So if those 2 guys cannot stay healthy and they miss multiple games, I think that this is probably a season where they regress a little bit, and all you really need is 1 win less. You need them to be 1 win worse, since his number's sitting at 8.5. So I think there's value on the under. I would lean under 8.5 wins for the Colts at minus 115. Another AFC South team, as we're going in alphabetical order here, we're on to the Jacksonville Jaguars, who also went 9-8 straight up and against the spread last season, missed out on the playoffs. Their total is sitting at over 8.5. And listen, I looked at a lot of stuff for every team. I think the Jaguars are going to have a massive bounce back season. All right. Trevor Lawrence's poor performance last season when he did play, so much chirping and talking about how he's not really that good. Oh, he was overrated, blah, blah, blah. He was playing through injuries, right? Like, he was hurt a lot. I think he's going to return this year. I think there's a better chance that he returns to his 2022 form rather than continue to regress or continue to get hurt. I think there's a good chance that he goes back to that Trevor Lawrence that we're used to seeing. Prior to the injuries catching up to them last year as well, I mean, the Jaguars were sitting at 8-3 before everybody started going down. They looked like a strong playoff team. They looked like they were going to compete for the division, and then it all kind of fell apart. But one thing that kept them in games, the defense. The defense was good. The sack rate was up last year. The pressure rate was up. Trayvon Walker was a key improvement. The defense, I think, overall took a big step forward, and I like that. Now, the one thing that I worry about, or it's a few things, but mainly the schedule, right? We always talk about this. In the first, the Jags schedule is very front-loaded, so they're going to have to close the season out strong. Because in the first 10 weeks of the season, they play the third toughest projected schedule. And then it drops off a cliff after that. So they've got to take advantage of the end. But in order to do that, they have to weather the storm, right? So they've got to win some of these early games early on in the season. 8 out of their first 12 games, as you can see, are against teams that made the playoffs last year. So I'm expecting maybe a little bit of a slow start. And what that's going to get us, right, and I'll talk about the win total, but I also want to make a note here. I think if the Jags start slow, right, these first 12 games, let's say they're 5-7, I think that could be the time you strike for maybe a divisional future or for them to make the playoffs, because the schedule is so soft to end the season. So I think watch out for that. Watch out for a slow start and keep an eye on the numbers as to where you can find value on this team. The defense wasn't great at forcing turnovers. They need to get more takeaways. That's one thing that I think they'll have a focused effort on. The running game also wasn't great. I mean, Travis Etienne is really good, but the running metrics they have wasn't great. Not many explosive runs. They need to do better a little bit on the offensive line. But I think overall, there's a lot to like here. I think overall they'll have a bounce back year. And I like the over 8.5 that we're just getting at -115. I think that's solid. And like I said, for this team, the future, you could bet them to win the division right now. It's +270. But I think the better bet with how I project their season to start is to wait 7, 8 games, 9 games. I know that's a long time from now, but betting is, you have to be patient, right? And I think that number could be a lot better than +270 at that point, and even maybe a number to make the playoffs. So I think they'll finish the season really strong. But for the purposes of this win total right here, over 8.5 at -115 for the Jags. The Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs have a win total this season of 11.5. Finished 11-6 straight up last season, 9-7-1 against the spread, and obviously were Super Bowl winners over the San Francisco 49ers. And listen, I think you got Pat Mahomes, you got Andy Reid, you got Spagnuolo, you got Travis Kelce. I don't know. I just feel like as long as those 4 guys are there, there's not really much else to say about what you like about this team. They just seem to find a way, no matter what happens. So I think with the Chiefs, it's just business as usual. Now, we need to look at this win total, though. It's 11.5. What are the negatives here? Okay, now recall that they have won 2 Super Bowls in a row. And after the first one, right, against the Eagles, they came back this season with a win total of 11.5. Okay, and they went under. So they won 11 games. They went under that win total. Now it's once again 11.5. Okay, so you have to just consider this, right? They're not a team that is going to go crazy and dominate the regular season and just beat up on everybody. They kind of know the deal. They pace themselves and they know when to turn it on. Super Bowl winners rarely come out, right, early in the season with that same energy, that same motivation that everyone else does. They've won 2 straight. I think you could see maybe a little bit of a struggle early on, a little bit of a letdown, as it's just there's not going to be a sense of urgency to start the season, I guess is what I'm saying. Now, there are some legitimate concerns, though, right? Because they were, the year that they won against the Eagles, that was like a top 3 or top 5 offense. They were unstoppable. But then last year, right, they were outside of the top 10 in like plenty of offensive metrics that I looked at, right? They didn't have much explosiveness. And we saw their offense die. If you remember the theme from last season with the Chiefs, they would play well in the first half, maybe take a lead. Then their offense would just fall off a cliff in the second half. They would struggle to move the ball. They would punt, field goal, punt, field goal. And then they would rely on their defense. I mean, we even saw this in the playoffs. They would rely on their defense to keep them in the game. And the defense was spectacular. So, but I will say that you cannot rely on that happening again. I mean, as good as the defense is, as good as Spags is, you got to be a little bit more consistent offensively through 4 quarters, right? You can't just take the third quarter off, which is what we saw a lot last year. But again, this is going to be a winning team. They're going to make the playoffs. They're going to win the AFC West. They are going to compete for a Super Bowl. But I think you got to go under the 11.5 wins because I think it's very likely, looking at their schedule, that they're probably just an 11-win team again. And they coast to the division win because the rest of the division stinks. And they get in, and then they make their run like they usually do. So I would lean under 11.5 at even money for the Chiefs this season. All right, guys, we are halfway through. If you are still here, we are powering through. Thank you for watching. Before we continue with the second half of the video, remember, the Gridiron Pass is now live. LockinCash.com/gridiron. This is our full season-long football pass that'll get you the full NFL season all the way to the Super Bowl, the full Super Bowl card, the full college football season, and the playoffs. You'll get the rest of the MLB season, whatever's left there. You'll get NBA, NHL, UFC on Saturdays, WNBA. And over the last 3 years in the NFL and college football combined, we're up over 90 units. So take advantage of this. It locks you in for the entire season. You don't have to worry about anything else. And the reports are emailed to you every single day. LockinCash.com/gridiron. All right, staying in the AFC West, on to the Las Vegas Raiders, who finished 8-9 straight up last season, but went a really good 10-6-1 against the spread. Missed out on the playoffs, but overall, I think a solid year. And the theme last season, if you guys remember, was the firing of the coach and then the switch to Antonio Pierce, which kind of boosted the team and revitalized the locker room. So with that being said, though, I think a massive regression year is coming for the Raiders. Antonio Pierce, yes, he shows promise as a young head coach. I really like him. Once they fired McDaniels, the players bought into him, and that's really important. They like him. He's very likable, a player's coach. And they played much better for the remainder of that season. They had a new focus on taking care of the football, limiting turnovers. That was really good with Pierce as the head coach. Good turnover margin. That's important. Good front seven. As you know, they can get pressure on the quarterback. That's something they can absolutely do. Good kicker, good punting. I mean, there's a lot of things that are in place for this team that I like, but the most important thing is quarterback, and you've got a huge issue here. I mean, you got Aiden O'Connell, but it's a huge question mark. We don't know how good he actually is. They've signed Gardner Minshew. We've seen Minshew go to plenty of teams now at this point where he just signs on to be the backup and then eventually gets the starting job, whether the guy in front of him just stinks or gets hurt. I mean, it just seems to be a common theme with him, so keep an eye on that. But I just don't like the situation they've got at quarterback. I'm not a huge fan of O'Connell. The running back room, they lost Josh Jacobs. That's going to be wildly different now. I don't think they're going to be very good running the ball. Their secondary is pretty bad. Project them to be bottom 5 in the league in terms of the back end of their defense. And, overall, they don't have much talent. Like their 8 wins that they got last year were based on that rah-rah, rally behind the new coach, Antonio Pierce, the hype, the motivation. That's really, really tough to replicate, right? Like after your first year as being a head coach, to come back in the second year and to get the guys to buy into all of that all over, do the whole thing all over again, especially when you're going to be up against more challenges this year because you don't have a really great roster from top to bottom, and you're going to be playing a top 10 schedule in terms of difficulty. The Raiders play the 9th toughest schedule overall right now projected for 2024. And I think that there's a risk of that effect kind of wearing off a little bit. Getting guys to, buy in initially is one thing, but then once you start a new season and maybe you start losing games and things get a little bit ugly because you are facing a lot of good teams this year, I think maintaining that's going to be a bit more difficult. So I think that's a lot of the turnovers that they got last year, a lot of the big motivational wins, they might not get those this year. You're getting 6.5 here at plus 120 to the under, and that's where I would go. I also think watch out for the Raiders to maybe be one of the worst teams. I'm not going to say sprinkle the worst record because I think that's probably going to be the Patriots or some team like that, or maybe even the Panthers again. But I would look. I think the Raiders are going to have a big regression year. We'll see. Maybe Antonio Pierce and company will prove me wrong, but I don't love the quarterback situation. I would go under 6.5 wins at plus 120. The LA Chargers are coming off of a pretty bad season, 5-12 straight up, 6-11 against the spread. Did not make the playoffs. It was a very disappointing year, but they have made a ton of changes. This is going to be a wildly different team, right? Obviously, the addition of Jim Harbaugh as head coach, Greg Roman as OC, Jesse Minter, DC. You got Justin Herbert, hopefully back and fully healthy. And listen, I really, really like what they did in terms of the coaching staff. I mean, this on paper looks like it could be an excellent group of coaches. And like I said before, when I was talking about the Bengals, they have kind of that rare mix of like they have a true elite QB1 and they have a really good head coach. And that's really not many teams can say that they have that. Now, as good as Justin Herbert has been in his career when he's been healthy and he's played, he's literally, I mean, Justin Herbert has never had a good head coach, like ever. This is going to be the first time he actually has that, and I think that it can make him a bit more dangerous, right? Like, I don't think we've seen his best yet. I think he was being held back certainly by Staley, by Brandon Staley, and also Anthony Lynn too when he was the coach. I think he's going to finally have good coaching around him. Some decent weapons around him. We'll talk about that, but I think he could be due for a big comeback year. I actually think they improved the running back situation, right? They lost Austin Eckler, but if you watched him play towards the end of last season, it was a big meme. No surprise there. He didn't have the boost that he normally had, and I won't say he's washed, but he's certainly past the prime in his career. But they ended up picking up both of the Baltimore Ravens backs, which are Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, and I think that's honestly probably overall a better duo than giving one guy. They can share the carries, and I think that they can produce just as much, especially with how Eckler looked towards the end of the season. I really liked what they did in the draft. They got Joe Alt to improve their offensive line. That was a big pick for them. And they picked up a receiver because Herbert needs weapons. So they got McConkey from Georgia. I think that's going to be really, really helpful for him, especially from what we've seen with receivers dropping the ball in minicamp now. But they're going to play the sixth easiest schedule of defenses, which I also think is going to help Herbert as well. Second easiest schedule overall for the Chargers. A big year for the Chargers. Now, like I said, the wide receiver room could use some more depth, maybe add some skill players, but they've got time to do that throughout the season. The defense also, they're going to have to kind of makeshift it throughout the season. It looks like it's a work in progress. The front seven is okay. The secondary is just okay. I mean, just the schedule, like I said, playing the second easiest schedule will give you a little bit more leeway. But overall, I think they need to do something to improve that defense. If I'm coming into the season and I'm the Chargers, I'm thinking I need to get one or two more weapons for Herbert, and I need to go hard on this defense. I need to get it much better. They also have an issue, which is later in the season, their rest starts to become a problem. So I think they need to front load wins. They're going to have a 17-day negative rest edge against their opponents in the second half of the season. So they're going to be playing games on short weeks. They're going to be playing games where their opponent has a rest advantage over them. Maybe it's coming out of a bye or whatever, but they need to be a little bit careful about that and plan accordingly. But I think the big theme for the Chargers is with this total sitting at 8.5, and it's heavily juiced to the over, by the way. I think the big thing here is get Herbert acclimated with his new coach, get him some more weapons. I think he's already got a decent situation. Get him some more weapons and work on that defense. But overall, really easy schedule. Okay, I think you have some value here still on the over 8.5, which is minus 150. But I would even go potentially towards an alt over and try to get 9 or 9.5. And see what the odds are there. You're going to get big plus money if it's 9.5. 9 might get you right around even money, which I would take. I think there's a good chance that they could win more than 9 games with this schedule. And I think also you could maybe sprinkle, on the off chance that the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs are winning the AFC West, but it's all about probabilities in sports betting, and it's about value on the number. The Chargers are plus 350 to win the division. That might be worth a sprinkle. Maybe the Chiefs have a really strong regression year after winning back-to-back Super Bowls. Maybe Mahomes gets a big key injury. I mean, you never know, right? But plus 350 on the Chargers, maybe. But I think there could be also value on an alternate win total here going, because it's 8.5 in the market, maybe getting over 9. But for the purposes of this video, over 8.5 and minus 150, I think that's really solid as a futures bet for the Chargers win total. The LA Rams had a pretty successful 2023, 10-7 straight up, 10-6-1 against the spread, and they ended up making the playoffs and lost in the wild card round, first round to the Detroit Lions, who eventually went to the NFC Championship. So solid season for the Rams in a season that I think, the expectations were not super high, but they still have their excellent quarterback head coach duo with Matt Stafford and with Sean McVay. Here's the thing with the Rams. Offense, it's good, right? But it hinges heavily on Matthew Stafford, and I think this could be the year that Matthew Stafford starts to break down physically. McVay's a really good offensive mind, and he's going to come up with ways to find success, to allow him to throw the ball. Yes, they've won a Super Bowl together. The offensive line's okay. Puka Nacua, breakout season. I mean, he's an amazing young wide receiver. But the defense really overperformed in 2023. I think they're going to take a little bit of a step back this season when I look at them. They were bottom 5 in terms of their front 7. Their pressure rate was not great. Secondary was okay. I also think losing Zach Robinson is going to be a problem as well as the offensive coordinator. He was able to get really good rushing schemes going for Kyren Williams. We'll see if they can replicate that without him this season. Kyren Williams had a really good year. They also have a very early bye week, and this goes back to what I was saying about Stafford. They have their bye week in week 6. So the Rams, with an older quarterback and I would say below average defense, I think there's a chance that they could end the season pretty poorly and start to spiral. So be careful with that. The schedule is, it's not super bad. It's kind of middle of the road. But they are going to play some good defenses, so I'd watch out for that. Watch out for Stafford with little nagging injuries that we've seen him, be able to overcome throughout his career. But as you get older, that gets tougher and tougher to do, especially when I look at this schedule and I look at the fact that their bye week is so early. They could really use that bye later in the season. They're going to have to go from week 7 to the end of the year playing a game every week. Going to be a little tough. So I think that you got some value on this under here. Yes, they won 10 games last year, but like I said, they overperformed a bit, and the league now will know, right? When you have a player like Puka Nacua last year who breaks out, defenses are not ready for that, and they don't know how good someone is. The league now knows, so it just gets harder to replicate, right? The NFL, there's a saying, NFL stands for not for long, right? And I'm not saying that Puka is not going to be great once again. I think he's going to be solid, but it's very difficult to continue to replicate. Like, only the greats can continue to replicate that success. So I think a little bit of regression coming for the Rams in terms of their passing attack and the defense as well. I would take a shot here at the under 8.5 and try to get plus 130 if I was going to bet this. This isn't on my list of futures, so it's not an official bet, but I would lean under here for the Rams. Over to the AFC East, where we're going to talk about the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins finished 11-6 straight up last season, 10-7 against the spread, ended up losing out on the division in the final week to the Buffalo Bills. Did make the playoffs, but lost in the first round. Lost the AFC wildcard matchup to the Chiefs. Their win total is sitting at 9.5. For me, with the Dolphins, they have one of the best offenses in football. I mean, elite passing attack. There's no question about that. And last year, I think their big breakthrough last year was that they figured out how to keep Tua healthy. Right? I mean, they were really efficient on offense, getting the ball out super quickly, and that kind of negated the fact that he would otherwise see a lot of pressure and get hit a lot, and we know what happens when he gets hit. They've got a couple of good running backs, really good speed. They've got just a lot of ways to beat you on offense, and that makes them a threat against anybody. The secondary is also really, really good. They already had Jalen Ramsey. Now they got Kendall Fuller. You can argue this is one of the best, if not the best, secondaries in football. Overall, a decent schedule. It's not super difficult, which I like for them, but it does end in brutal fashion. All right, they've got 6 straight games to end the season against playoff teams from last year. 4 of those are on the road. Very, very tough way to end the season. But I think overall, I don't see really how they go under this to 9.5 wins. But here's the big, in terms of win total, yeah, I'd lean over. But the big thing with the Dolphins is it's just the same old story at this point, right? Like they simply couldn't beat good teams last season. They could not win on the road, big games on the road. We saw it immediately when they got to the playoffs. They were just non-competitive in Kansas City. They were 1-5 against the Dolphins were 1-5 against playoff teams last season, and they had a negative 91-point differential. 91 points. They were getting blown out by good teams. They're going to finish, and they're going to face 10 teams this season that finished over 500 last year. So once again, you got to be able to show up for these games against better teams. You can't just beat up on non-playoff teams all the time. They also have not a great they have a bottom 10 offensive line projected as of right now, which again, that forces them to throw the ball very quickly, which they were successful doing last season. But like I said, NFL stands for not for long. You got to be able to do this over and over again until you reach the peak of the mountaintop. So pressure rates got to get better on the other side of the ball. And they have to continue being able to utilize their speed to beat other teams. But like I said, the big concern for me is, yeah, you can go out there and you can win 10, 11 games, what happens when you got to go to someone's building for a playoff game. The Dolphins just seem to fall short every time. But for the purposes of the win total, I would lean over 9.5 at -120. I think they will compete once again for the division. I think eventually they will lose it. I think Buffalo wins the division, but I would go over 9.5 for the Miami Dolphins. The Minnesota Vikings could end up as the worst team in the NFL this season. I think there's a real chance that happens. They were 7-10 straight up last year, 7-7-3 against the spread, and they missed out on the playoffs. Now, the quarterback situation, you got Sam Darnold, you got J.J. McCarthy. I don't know who's going to end up starting. I think they both stink, to be honest. Aaron Jones is a good addition. The rest of the roster is in, kind of heavy flux. But, it's nice to have a good running back that is solid. Their schedule is also not bad. They're going to have a bunch of weeks where they have a rest edge over their opponent, right? They actually only have a rest disadvantage in one game for the entire season, which is really good. The problem is, though, what are you getting out of the quarterback position, right? Sam Darnold's a serviceable quarterback in this league, but still absolutely below average. Are you going to bank on getting a breakout season from J.J. McCarthy? Really tough to say. I'm not sure. I think you're going to have some turmoil around this offense. The front seven on defense also downgraded majorly, losing some key players. I think Brian Flores is going to have his work cut out for him as defensive coordinator. There's also a risk here that, when I think of teams that come into the season set up this way, when you have a star wide receiver like Justin Jefferson, and we know how wide receivers are divas, and, he's no exception to that. So the thing that I was thinking about with the Vikings is what happens if you come into this season and Sam Darnold's not playing well, then you go to McCarthy. He struggles as a lot of rookie QBs come into the NFL, and they just cannot deal with the pressure from the other defense. There's a lot of reasons why, but now what happens if you suddenly have a disgruntled star wide receiver in Justin Jefferson because the quarterbacks just cannot get him the ball? I think there's a chance that situation unfolds in Minnesota, and you start to have some real locker room issues. Now, this is, of course, me thinking ahead, but these are the types of scenarios that you have to play out, in your mind when you're trying to find value on certain bets. Now, they have those edges in the schedule, like I said, but they still play some pretty good teams this season. And they play in a really tough division. I mean, you've got 6 games against 3 other teams that are far better than you. I mean, they're the worst team by far in the NFC North. And then look at their non-divisional games, right? They're going to play the Niners this season, the Jets, the Texans, the Falcons. They're going to play the Jags and the Colts. They're going to play the Rams. I mean, these are good teams. These are teams that are all going to be competing for a playoff spot. So really, I think the 7, they've got a 7 out in the market right now at -120. I think that's an easy under 7 for the Vikings. And I think, like I said, if things start to crumble and things just go south and they become sellers, I mean, I think there's a chance that the Vikings could be one of the worst teams, a bottom 3 team in the league. So for Minnesota, sorry, Vikings fans out there, no offense, no hard feelings, but give me the under 7 at -120. All right, so I just mentioned how the Vikings could be one of the worst teams in the NFL. Well, now let's get to the actual probably worst team in the NFL. The New England Patriots have a posted win total of 4.5, which is the lowest right now. They were 4-13 last season, 5-11-1 against the spread, and they did not make the playoffs. And if you see a big smile on my face during most of this section of the video, it's because I'm a Jets fan, so this is all good news to me. In terms of the good stuff, all right, they hired a new coach, obviously, Gerard Mayo. Jacoby Brissett looks like he's going to start, but they've got Drake May taking snaps as well in camp, and he can maybe, be who they eventually go to. But in terms of the pros, in terms of the things that I like about this team, I mean, listen, they had a lot of injury misfortune last season. Maybe that regresses, and they play out this season a bit more healthy. Some positive regression on injuries. Maybe having a new head coach gives you a new identity, a boost. Maybe it's a motivating factor. But overall, this is a horrendous team. I mean, horrendous. And the Patriots got absolutely screwed with this schedule for 2024. They're going to face a top 3 schedule in the NFL as of right now projected, and that is a brutal draw for a team that's already awful. They also project to have one of the bottom 5 offensive lines. They don't have really any weapons at wide receiver. You don't know who your quarterback's going to be. Now, the lone bright spot when we talk about the Pats is that secondary and that, in general, that defense. But just like, here's my thoughts on that, though. Just like when Brady left and everybody started saying, oh, CU was Brady. They can't be good without Brady. CU was Brady. Now that Bill is gone, I think that's going to be something that is going to be talked about for the defense, because I think this defense, I think there's a chance they take a major step back without him. I mean, Belichick is a great defensive mind, and I think that a lot of their defensive success was because of him, whether people realize it or not. So him leaving, I think, could be a huge, huge hole on that side of the ball that people are not realizing. So people will still say, yeah, but they still have a good defense. The defense will keep them in games. I don't know. Since Bill is not there, I don't know if the defense is going to keep them in games. They could just get blown out every game. So they got screwed with their schedule. The era of Belichick Brady is officially dead now with Belichick gone. And you don't know who your quarterback is, and you got really no weapons on offense. And, it's just a shit show for the Pats. I think this is a clear under 4.5 at plus 130. I think you could even sprinkle them to have the worst record in the NFL. I think that's a possibility as well. Listen, they had a lot of years of success. This is just how it goes. It's a cycle. So they're going to have a couple of bad years here. So give me the under 4.5 at plus 130 for the New England Patriots. All right, back to the NFC South. We have the New Orleans Saints, who went 9-8 straight up last season, 6-10-1 against the spread, and did not make the playoffs. Their win total is sitting here at 7.5. This is one of those teams where I don't feel strongly either way about this team. I really don't like them, but in terms of the talent and the quarterback situation, but the Saints have been given a little bit of a gift this year in terms of their schedule, because they will play a pretty easy schedule, fifth or sixth, depending on your projections, easiest schedule in the NFL this season. And they've got a good secondary, no denying that. But everywhere else, they're pretty mediocre. If I look at what they did well last year, they were good in the red zone. They were a top 10 red zone offense, and scored a high percentage of touchdowns in the red zone. But as I discussed earlier with Green Bay, that's one of those things that tends to regress, right? It's very hard to maintain that level of success in the red zone. They did, two tight end sets for Derek Carr was pretty good. It brought their offense, awoken their offense a little bit. And they are going to play an easy schedule, so we'll see how that goes. But when I look at this team, the first word that came to my mind was just mediocre. They're just average all around, right? The rush efficiency was not good. Kamara is going to be less efficient probably this year, a year older. You know how running backs get. Derek Carr's a solid NFL quarterback, but he's not great, right? He's not good enough to get you to where you want to be as a team. So just having him here at quarterback to me every year is just like another year goes by and you're not going to compete for much because he's just an average quarterback. And they stayed really healthy last year. They were 7th in injury luck last season. I don't know that you can expect that to happen again. That's one of those things where there's two things, guys, that swing wildly year over year in the NFL. Injury luck and turnover luck. And that's why I keep harping on those two things as we've gone through this video. You've probably heard me talk about them 10, 15 times. It's because those are the two things that swing back and forth every year. You have a really good year when everyone stays healthy. The next year, some guys are going to get hurt. You got a really good year where you force a gazillion turnovers. The next year, you're going to struggle. You're probably going to turn the ball over a lot more. And it's all just the universe balancing itself out, but it's up to us to take advantage of it. So now, while I don't love the team, while I don't love all the pieces, everything I just said, the last note that I have here is, but I think the schedule is just so favorable that I think this number is too low. I mean, 7.5. I think you can find. I think the Saints can find 8 wins this season. They would still be worse than they were last year when they won 9 games, but they would still go over this number. So I think you've got value on this just based on how favorable this schedule is. I think they have a solid chance of finishing 8 and 9. I would go over 7.5 wins for the Saints at -120. The New York Giants finished 6-11 straight up last season, 8-1 against the spread. Did not make the playoffs. Obviously, going to have, they basically played last season without a quarterback. Going to have Daniel Jones back under center this year. Still another year under Brian Daboll. We'll see what the Giants cook up. But in terms of, now their win total sitting at 6.5. So what does that mean, right? Always look at these and look at the schedule and try to say, where can I find the wins? And then you dig deeper, right? I look at the Giants schedule and I cannot find 7 wins on this Giants schedule. All right, I just can't. Now, they got killed by injuries last season, which was to be, like I said, kind of to be expected. What I talked about earlier about swinging back and forth. 2022, they have that amazing run. They make the playoffs. They win a playoff game in Minnesota. last year they have all these horrendous injuries and the luck just goes out the window. But at the same time, that's kind of like rock bottom. And now there's really nowhere to go but up this season. And the big thing for them is, okay, if Daniel Jones is healthy, right, he does one thing. He's now evolved into doing one thing really well, and that's taking care of the football. All right. He had that problem earlier in his career. He's gotten much better at taking care of the football. All right. And also, if you look at some of these key metrics that I like to look at, he had the lowest percent of incompletions last season that were due to inaccuracy. So his wide receivers were just dropping a lot of balls. He was actually throwing the ball pretty well when he was healthy. Lots of drops, lots of unfortunate luck. But like I said, that things like that happen after you have a crazy run like they did in 2022. They did draft Malik Neighbors. I think that's one of the best picks in the draft. I think he's going to help them a lot in terms of their coaching department. In terms of their wide receivers and in terms of the coaching department. I think they're solid overall. I don't really have a problem with Daboll or Kafka. So I think they're solid on the sidelines. Now the big things are Daniel Jones taking care of the football, but he's got to be a bit more efficient when he throws it. All right, he's really good as a scrambler, but he's coming off of that major knee injury. I mean, that's going to affect his speed, his ability. Does he have the same confidence in running and planting that foot, juking? I mean, there's a lot of things that go along with being a scrambler that we just take for granted, and that was a big part of his game when he was healthy, and he was able to run the ball for first downs. So we're going to have to see him do that again now post-knee injury. And the other reason why I'm concerned about this team is because this offensive line is so bad. I mean, it's a joke. The offensive line is so bad, and he's going to be facing so much pressure, and he's not great under the blitz unless he can get away, right, which we just talked about, his scrambling. But now you're coming off of a knee injury, having to do that once again. Unless he can get away, he's not great when he's facing pressure, and they're going to allow a lot of pressure. The Giants' offensive line is going to allow a lot of pressure this season. All right, the defense was also really bad last year. I think they'll improve. All right, they did lose Xavier McKinney. That was a big hit. But new defensive coordinator Shane Bowen, I think the defense, I just can't see that defense being as bad as it was last year again. They got to get better. But overall, obviously I didn't even mention the biggest thing, which was losing Saquon. But overall, if I combine all of this together, Jones coming off of knee surgery, where he's in an offense where he's going to have to move out of the pocket and run, knee injury, losing Saquon with this horrendous offensive line. Like, how are you running the ball if you're the Giants? The defense needs to take a step forward, but it was pretty bad last year. I just can't see 7 wins. You can look at it here. The schedule's up. I mean, I just cannot find 7 wins here. So I'd go under. It's juiced, but I would go under 6.5 wins for the Giants at -145. I think that's the best bet for this team. Okay, I mentioned earlier that I was a Jets fan, and I promise you that this section will not be with any bias, because I'm just looking at metrics and stuff like that. And a lot of you know that my team in baseball is the Yankees. How many times have I bet against the Yankees this summer? Tons of times. So this is just from a gambling perspective, even though I am a Jets fan. I would like to see them do well this year, but that doesn't really happen very, very often in my lifetime, so don't worry about it. 7-10 straight up last season, 6-10-1 against the spread. Miss out on the playoffs, and now they've got a win total of 9.5 right now. That's juiced to the over. So we'll see. Now, I genuinely think that this team can be great, okay? Can be, but that's, like I said, throughout my life, that's been a common theme for the Jets. But I think this season, if Rodgers is healthy, the Jets can be a very good team. But it's going to take a lot to get there, right? Now, what do they have going for them? They're playing a top 5 schedule in terms of ease, right? So they're right now projected 4th easiest schedule of opponents, okay? The defense is the bright spot. They were excellent last season. And they weren't excellent in one of these ways where sometimes you'll see a team, that defense overperformed because they played a bunch of rookies. They played a bunch of backup quarterbacks. Maybe guys got hurt. The Jets played excellent competition last season and were great defensively. They had games against Patrick Mahomes. They played Josh Allen, obviously twice. They played C.J. Stroud, Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts. So they're non-divisional games. They played some terrific quarterbacks. And the defense still was excellent. 1st in yards per play, 4th in points per drive, top 5 in so many defensive metrics. The offensive line on the other side was a problem, but they bolstered it. They signed Tyron Smith and a couple of others. They got to stay healthy in the middle of that offensive line, but so far it's trending upwards. That's going to obviously benefit Rodgers, but it's also going to benefit Breece Hall, who's one of the best young running backs in the league. So like I said, the Jets have a lot going for them. A lot of things to like about this roster. the big asterisk I have here in front of me on the screen is just if the quarterback stays healthy. If Rodgers can stay healthy, a 40-year-old quarterback coming off of an Achilles tear, it's going to be difficult. The big question is, can he return to his MVP form? A lot of people, I think, just feel like, oh, he's going to get hurt again, or if Rodgers is back. But there's a dangerous in-between there where he comes back and stays healthy, but is just not as good as he was before. And I think that's the concern. Like, does Aaron Rodgers come back, and he's MVP Rodgers again? Does Aaron Rodgers come back and re-aggravate that injury? Or does Aaron Rodgers come back and just be a normal, slightly above average quarterback? And I think that last scenario is the worst one, because it's just going to make you a middle-of-the-road team with all this great talent on this team. Like I said, the interior on the offensive line is another note that I have here. It's a bit thin. They got to stay healthy up there. You got Garrett Wilson, who I think is going to be a great wide receiver one, a great connection for Rodgers. But then you got a little bit of a drop-off after that. You've got Mike Williams, but he's coming off of a torn ACL. He's been injury-prone in his career. The Jets I think they got to get production out of the tight end. I think they got to rely heavily on Breece Hall. I think he's going to have a big year. So all of that, listen, the schedule, like I said, the biggest things I look at here, how did the team do last year in terms of turnover, in terms of the luck statistics, right? Turnovers, injury, and then scheduling. The scheduling this year, if Rodgers plays the full season, how do you not win 10 games with this schedule? The over 9.5 is -150. That's where I would go. If you have strong feelings that he will not stay healthy, if you have strong feelings that they will struggle in terms of like the quarterback position, then you go under, obviously. But I'm assuming Rodgers plays healthy, he plays well. There's no reason the Jets shouldn't win 10 games this season if Rodgers stays healthy. And I keep saying it, but it's such a massive, asterisk. He has to stay healthy for them to win. But I would lean over 9.5 wins, -155 for the Jets. All right, now we're going to get to a team that I'm incredibly high on this season. I think out of the teams that I've talked about so far, I think probably the one that I've been most high on was Detroit. I had a lot of nice things to say about them. But now we're going to get to the Eagles. Okay, the Eagles were 11-6 straight up last season, 7-8-2 against the spread, made the playoffs, but lost out on the division, so they had to go to Tampa for the wild card round, and they got smoked in Tampa Bay. All right, like I said, I'm very high on the Eagles this season. It feels like everyone thinks the Eagles' dominance is over, but I'm here to tell you that it's coming back, right? Like, that's kind of the vibe I feel with this team. They had a very, very bad second half, or not even second half, but end of the 2023 season, where regression just killed them. If you guys remember in 2022, when they went to the Super Bowl, lost to the Chiefs, I was on, not so much here on YouTube, but I was on TikTok and Instagram talking so much about how the Eagles are going to regress. They're going to regress because they were 10-1. They were killing everybody. They looked unbeatable. Even throughout the entire playoffs, like something's going to happen here. They're going to regret. You can't have this luck for the whole season. The law of averages, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, Chiefs end up winning the Super Bowl, but the Eagles were amazing for the entire season. Then they start 10-1 again last season, and then that's when they get hit with the bug. You remember like week 7, 8, 9, people were saying, like, when is this going to end? Nobody can beat the Eagles. They're so dumb. And then finally, boom, they get hit 10-1, finish the season 11-6. So completely fizzled out for the end of the season, lose a division, knocked out in the first round. This year, though, big improvement for the Eagles. Last year was a perfect storm of getting a tougher schedule and coming off of an amazing year, so the regression hit them. This year, they get the 8th easiest schedule overall. It's a massive improvement for them, and it's also front-loaded, which I like. The more difficult games are in the earlier portion of their schedule, so they should end the season stronger than they did last year. And momentum is a big thing in the NFL. So you need to end the season. It's okay. A lot of teams can get over a rough start to the season, but few teams can get over a bad, a rough ending to the season. So, and of course, they added Saquon Barkley. Just a terrific O-line. They're going to have a great rushing attack with Saquon. The wide receiver group is phenomenal with Smith and Brown. Excuse me, among the best in the NFL. Front seven is still good, even though they lost a couple pieces there. Still very good. Front seven generating pressure. And the secondary should be improved. That was one of their big issues last season, was the secondary. It should be better this year on paper. Now, losing Jason Kelce to retirement, yes, you're going to have to adjust to that. That's the biggest piece they lost. He is, I don't want to say he's the only reason, because Hurts has a lot to do with it, but he is a big reason why the tush-push play was so successful for the Eagles, right? What did they convert that on, like 94, 93% of something crazy of the time that they ran the tush push to get the first down. I mean, a lot of that was because of Kelsey. So they're going to have to, fill his role somehow. So that is tough. I'm not going to pretend like that isn't. But the secondary, right, which is what I mentioned before, they were atrocious last season. They should get better this season. But when we talk about getting better, they added talent through the draft. So they're going to have to rely on some rookies to step up. And, maybe in the beginning of the season, there's some growing pains. And the tougher games are in the beginning of the season. But I think they'll come on strongly at the end. But I just, again, their number sitting at 10.5 here. And this number feels like Vegas knows the deal. I think the Eagles, despite fizzling out to end the season, despite getting blown out in Tampa in the playoffs, they still come out with a 10.5 posted win total. It's juiced to the over -130. I feel like Sharps and Vegas knows the deal on this one. I think a big bounce. And I think you could even maybe get some value on the Eagles in terms of futures, maybe to win the NFC, to win their division if they start off slowly with that schedule. I could tell you that right now to win the NFC East, they are -125. Full disclosure, I already bet that when it was +100, when I got it even money. So I got +100. It's now -25. I think they win the NFC East pretty easily. I think it's a huge bounce back year for Philly. So I would go over 10.5 wins. They won 11 last season, over 10.5 at -130. And I think you can argue they've gotten much better this year. I think that will show on the field, especially second half of the season. So give me Philly over the 10.5 wins. The Steelers had a remarkable season in 2023. There's no way that team should have won 10 games, 10-7 straight up and against the spread. Made the playoffs, lost in the wild card round to the Buffalo Bills, but just wildly overperforming. And listen, when it comes to the Steelers, only one guy really matters, and that's Mike Tomlin. Matt Canada is gone this year, which is good. The offseason, they did spend time and resources trying to improve the offense. They brought in Justin Fields, they brought in Russell Wilson, added Arthur Smith as the offensive coordinator. That's going to change the offense quite a bit, and I think that's going to be good. It should help. Overall, it should help. The defense was pretty good last season, too. Top 10 in points allowed, top 10 in pressure rate, top 10 in EPA per play on defense. The stat that everyone throws out, Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season. Yes, he's an exceptional head coach. Their win total sitting at 8.5. So Vegas is asking you to pick. Are you going to take a bet on him having his first losing season? That's what this is basically saying to you. Really good front seven, couple of good running back. I mean, there's things to like. However, I do have a lot listed in the red section as well for Pittsburgh. So last season, one thing that I noticed is they relied heavily on the fourth quarter. They had the 5th best fourth quarter differential in the league in order to get those 10 wins. But that's something that regresses pretty often as well. They need to have a better effort early on in games. You can't come into every second half down at the half. That really takes a toll on your team after a while. The O-line is one thing that I would look at as being below average. The receiving core, right? Who are you really throwing the ball to here? Obviously, they had major issues last year on offense, and that, I will say, was mostly due to the quarterbacks they were throwing out there. That's going to improve a little bit this season, but they don't have a bunch of great weapons. Now, the biggest thing holding them back is there are two things for me. Their division, which is incredibly strong, having to play the Browns, the Bengals, and the Ravens 6 times a year. And they did get a really tough schedule, all right? Cincinnati's going to get better, so the division's getting better. Cleveland's going to probably be better or healthier. But now look at their non-divisional games that they play. They're going to play the Chiefs. They're going to play the Eagles, the Cowboys. They're going to play the Jets. They're going to play the Falcons. And look at how they end the season. Look at the games that Pittsburgh ends the season at Philly, at Baltimore, then the Chiefs and the Bengals. I mean, brutal way to end it. I think they have to front load wins. They got to start off fast because this is a really rough end to the schedule. But with all that being said, this is juiced to the under right now. So the odds makers or the money that has come in is saying Tomlin might have his first losing year at 8-9 maybe, or 7-10. I think the value is on the over 8.5, despite everything I just said to you. I mean, because like I said at the beginning of this section, only one guy really mattered. Tomlin finds a way. So if you're going to give me plus money on a guy that's never had a losing season, I'm probably just going to sprinkle it. So, this is not an official bet for me. I haven't taken it yet, but if I were to bet this win total for Pittsburgh, I'd go over 8.5. If you want to get crazy, maybe take them to make the playoffs. Let's see what their Pittsburgh to make the playoffs, because I do think that's realistic again for them this year. Plus 160 to make the playoffs. Yes. Maybe that's worth a look. I wouldn't take them to win the division. I think they are probably the 3rd or 4th best team, but yeah, plus 160 to make the playoffs, maybe a sprinkle, but I would go over 8.5 at plus 125 for the Steelers. Now we get to the other Super Bowl participant from last season, the San Francisco 49ers. Finished 12-5 straight up last year, 9-8 against the spread. Got to the Super Bowl and fell a little bit short. Kyle Shanahan returning, obviously, this season, calling plays for Brock Purdy. And, a lot of good things about this team. Obviously, on paper, a phenomenal team. But if I had to make a prediction, right, we know about some of the statistics about teams coming off of a Super Bowl loss, not a win. They tend to do just as poorly as the winners. It almost seems like just making it to the Super Bowl itself is such a massive accomplishment in the NFL that teams just come out a little bit flat the following year. Now, my prediction will be that the league catches up a little bit to the 49ers, okay? Now, what do I mean by that? Specifically, I'm talking about the rushing attack, which was unbelievable last season. I think it's going to be difficult to maintain that. Obviously, they made the Super Bowl. One of the things that I thought was a really good sign for them, they got to, not only did they get to Super Bowl, Brock Purdy specifically, he played really well in the game. All right, so I think you're set. Like all the nonsense doubters from last season, throw it out the window. The kid's legit. He's going to be here for a long time. All right, Brock Purdy is the dude. I think without question the best running back in the NFL. You've got an excellent front seven on defense. You have a really good group of receivers, tons of talent. I mean, arguably the best collection of offensive talent in the league. And Brock Purdy's going to be a year better, right? He's a young kid. He's going to be better. Now, looking at the things that I don't like, they played a pretty easy schedule last season. They didn't play many good passing defenses. And they didn't play many good rushing defenses. But when they did, they played 4 games against top 10 passing defenses. And when they did, they lost 3 out of those 4 games. So that's could be a bigger issue this season where they're going to face more competition. Their schedule is harder than it was last year, and they might have to throw the ball more because they're going to face some very good rushing defenses this season. And if they get limited on the ground, it's going to force Purdy to throw the ball more. Like last year, they just really didn't have to throw the ball. So they relied heavily on the ground game. I think that might change a little bit this year. You also lost some key pieces, right, on defense. I mean, Eric Armstead is gone. Who else? Kinlaw's gone. Chase Young is gone. You're going to have to fill those holes. Those are some pretty good players. And then another couple of really good players, Greenlaw and Hufanga, come off of major injuries, right? Major lower body injuries. They're going to have to get back healthy, acclimated to the mix. I always get concerned with guys. I know the medical teams these days are really, really good, but I always get concerned with guys coming back off of injuries to see how they come back. Another note here, yes, the Super Bowl losers tend to not do great the next season, but specifically in week 1, by the way. They're like 4-17 or something ATS in week 1, last 20, 21 years, something like that. But they are going to face, the big thing here I would say is they're going to face a stronger schedule of rushing defenses, and I think that's going to change the way they run the ball. I think they're going to have to rely on the pass just a little bit more, and that could become a problem for them because they are facing some pretty good defenses this season. So all that combined with the Super Bowl hangover, I guess you can call it. I took the Chiefs under. I'm taking the Niners under 11.5 at -120 for San Francisco. All right, staying in the NFC West, we've got the Seattle Seahawks, who finished 9-8 straight up last season, 8-7-2 against the spread, did not make the playoffs, lost Pete Carroll as their head coach. New era in Seattle. All right, Geno Smith is still the quarterback. Mike McDonald now the head coach. Previously the defensive coordinator for the Ravens. Obviously some great defenses that he coached over there in Baltimore. And Seattle does have talent on that side of the ball, so I think there's a good chance that he comes in and improves this defense, maybe to be a slightly above average. They're also really strong at the skill positions, right? If we're talking about what we like about Seattle, they've got good wide receivers, they've got decent running backs, and maybe getting rid of, not getting rid of, but maybe Pete Carroll leaving is kind of like a fresh start that you need. The same thing with Belichick up in New England. Sometimes you just need to move on, right? And it could have just been that time for Pete Carroll, and maybe now you get a little bit of rejuvenation or momentum up in Seattle. So their total sitting at 7.5 right now. The things that worry me a little bit is, well, before I get to the just overall, I think the Seahawks are just like the definition of mediocre overall. But like I said, they've got some of the good stuff like the skill positions. Geno Smith proved to be pretty solid last season. I gotta admit that I was a doubter when he got the starting job, and when he was playing well, I was like, this will not continue. This will not continue. He's been able to keep it up, so props to him. Now the problem is the offensive line was and is not good. I mean, they haven't done much to improve it. Its pressure is going to be a problem once again. And as you know from last season, Geno Smith does not have good numbers against the blitz or under pressure. He's going to be under pressure this season once again. Just kind of seems like a middle of the road team. This is more of a reset year for them with a new coach. I don't think they're going to compete for much this season like they did last year. And Geno was able to survive, honestly, with that bad pressure rate, bad offensive line. But if he were to get hurt this year, I mean, who you bet? Now you've got Sam Howell backing him up. So the team, I think, hinges pretty heavily on Geno Smith staying healthy. And I'm not sure that you can count on that to happen again with the amount of blitz looks they got last year and the pressure rate that he faced last year when he was not good. If that's a consistent theme again this season, I think you're going to be in trouble. So for me, I look at the schedule and I think that this could be a regression year for a team that I believe overperformed. We've talked about some teams that overperformed last year. I'd go under 7.5 here at plus 115 for the Seahawks. I know this one might seem a little aggressive, right? It's only 7.5, 8. With all they need is 8 wins, they could still be a losing team. But there's a reason this is sitting at 7.5, right? Because I think the odds makers know. I think this is a regression year for Seattle, and those can be tough to call sometimes. But I think there's value on this number still. If I were to bet it, I would go under 7.5 at plus 115 for Seattle. Just overall, not much to say about them. Like I said, kind of a middle of the road team. No strong feelings either way. But give me that under 7.5. Tampa Bay Buccaneers 9-8 straight up last season, but 11-6 against the spread. Pretty good betting team. Lost in the NFC divisional round. Got to the playoffs. Won their division. Got a home playoff game in the wild card round. Beat up on the Eagles. Then lost in the divisional round to the I believe it was the Lions. Right? They lost to the Lions. Really good progress year for the Bucs last season. They made significant progress. Like I said, make the playoffs, win a playoff game. That offense had rough stretches, but it kind of forced the defense to keep them in games. And now that they have a new offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen, I think that should improve this season. Those long droughts they had on offense could maybe get better. And, their offensive line has been talked about a lot. It was pretty bad last year. And they did a good job of kind of like playing around that and avoiding anything catastrophic, but they weren't great. They did spend a first-round pick there, try to improve. We'll see how that goes. Now, I think the biggest thing going for the Bucs is that they just play in a relatively weak division. With the Falcons are going to be much improved, but the Saints and the Panthers. So the NFC South is one of the weaker divisions in football, which always gives them a shot. And they are going to play a bottom 10 schedule in terms of difficulty, so that the Bucs will get an easier schedule this season. But I just have a feeling. I look at this team. They didn't make a lot of moves in the offseason, and after having a 9-8 season last year, I feel like the Bucs are going to be kicking themselves this season because the rest of the division got better while they didn't. That's kind of how I feel about this. The offensive line, even though it was not great last season, was still very healthy. I mean, they stayed very healthy throughout the season and still were bottom 10 in like a lot of key measures, like pass block win rate. They were dead last in run block win rate. So you're talking about just a bad offensive line. It's not about health. And you can't count on that health once again. So if this offensive line were to sustain any injuries, then they're going to be in a massive shitstorm. And out of the Bucs' 9 wins last season, they won 1 game against a playoff team. They feasted on bad competition. Now, they will get an easy schedule again, so that is to their favor. But they still can't run the ball, and I don't think they're going to get much better at it because that offensive line just cannot generate the holes. They cannot open up the gaps that running backs need. They also had some pretty good luck elsewhere, right? They finished 3rd in field goal luck, 10th in injury luck. Like I mentioned, the offensive line was really healthy. And Baker Mayfield, I mean, you can argue, which I would agree with this, that Baker Mayfield put up unsustainable numbers. Like, I don't actually think he's that good. I think they kind of caught lightning in a bottle last season. I think it's likely that he will probably regress this year because he was putting up pretty solid numbers and pretty solid performances with a really bad offensive line and essentially no rushing attack. I'm not sure that can continue this year. Teams are getting better. Teams will know what to expect now. This is juiced to the under for a reason. Even though they were a 9-8 team last year that won a playoff game, it's under 8.5 at minus 140, and that is where I would go. That is where I would lean for this. Just looking at the schedule, I don't think you get 9 wins again out of the Buccaneers. Give me under 8.5 for Tampa at minus 140. Tennessee Titans have a win total of 6.5. This is not a good team. 2023, they finished 6-11 straight up, 7-9-1 against the spread. Didn't make the playoffs over in the AFC South. Mike Vrabel out, Brian Callahan in. and he'll be calling plays for his young quarterback, Will Levis. Listen, the Titans suck, but they did overhaul their coaching staff. They have a clean slate to start with now, which can, sometimes that can lead to early success throughout the season. And they were, despite having a pretty bad offensive line last season, they did do well rushing the ball. Now, a lot of that was because of Derrick Henry, who is now gone, but the other backs also played well. So I don't want to just attribute it only to Derrick Henry. And their secondary is the bright spot, right? That's probably a top 12-ish, 13-ish unit in the league. They've got some okay talent at wide receiver. Levis has some stuff to work with, but it's a work in progress, right? This is not a year where the Titans are going to make some substantial jump and suddenly compete when you don't expect them to. No, this is for sure a progress and building year. The biggest issue is the offensive line, which I mentioned earlier, but also the front seven. The front seven is projected to rank bottom 5 in the NFL in terms of getting pressure on the quarterback. We'll see how that goes. Young quarterback, new head coach. Sometimes that's good for the future, but not great early on. This could just be, I think this is probably going to be a throwaway season for the Titans. And one of the main reasons why is they're going to face a brutal schedule, which is the last and most important thing I have to say about them. They're going to face a top 7 schedule in terms of difficulty. Look at this schedule that's here right now and find me 7 wins. I can't find it. I've looked. I've tried pretty hard. Not much else to say about some of these really bad teams. You try to find value here and there. There's no value on the Titans to win the AFC South. There's no value on them to make the playoff. None of that stuff. They're going to be a bad team, and they're going to win 6 or less games. So I would go under 6.5 at -120 for Tennessee. Finally, if you've made it this far, we are on the last team. The Washington Commanders have a win total of 6.5. Finished 4-13 last season, but 6-10-1 against the spread. Missed out on the playoffs, but it's a new era and a new future for Washington. They welcome in new head coach Dan Quinn with the second overall pick in the draft, Jayden Daniels. Jayden Daniels is the light at the end of the tunnel for Washington, okay? He is a tremendous talent. He should come in and have an immediate impact, okay? I'm going to say a lot of good things about him. He's great. They got rid of Chase Young. They got rid of Montez Sweat last season, yes, on the front line, but they did improve other parts of their defense. Okay, they do have some new edge rushers. They got Bobby Wagner. They got Frankie Louvu, linebacker. They did some good things, all right? And Dan Quinn, previously the defensive coordinator of the Cowboys, did a really good job. I mean, they had really good defenses there when he was there. Did a really good job there. If nothing else, he should come in and improve that defense, even based on just the talent that they have sitting there. So I think that's a good signing for them at head coach. But it is going to be a tall task. I mean, they've got a shitload of work to do. That defense was one of the worst in the NFL last season, pretty much across the board. So while I think they'll improve, they're still going to be below average, right? If you guys get what I'm saying, just to clarify. The offensive line, also a big problem for a young quarterback coming in. Now, Daniels is very shifty, but we saw Sam Howell play quarterback for the Commanders last season, running for his life pretty much every game. He got annihilated, all right? He got sacked a bunch of times. He got hit very hard. That's going to be a problem. And he's not statue. He can move a little bit. Now, Jayden Daniels is much more shifty, much more elusive, so that's going to help a little bit. But at the same time, pressure at the NFL level is not like pressure at the college level, all right? It's just much different. The guys are much more talented. They're much more, lighter on their feet. It's just much different. Now, the skill positions are also a concern for me. Not much talent there besides McLaurin at wide receiver. So I think you have some pieces to work with. But again, this is a massive work in progress. And looking at the schedule, 7 wins seems a bit steep to go from 4 to 7-10. I think this is probably a 1 or 2 win improvement season for the Commanders, unless Daniels just proves to be beyond anyone's imagination. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to be good. He's going to be better than Sam Howell was, but I also think he's going to make a lot of mistakes because he's a high variance quarterback, right? He's going to run. He's going to be dynamic, but he might also make some silly throws. He might also take some risks that you don't want him to take in terms of, maybe like slide at the right time, right? Don't dive, things like that. You don't want to see him get hurt. So I think there's a lot of variance here, but I still think they go under this number. 6.5, under 6.5 at -105. I think it's a better season for Washington, but not better to make a 3-game improvement, especially with the schedule. So give me under 6.5 for the Commanders, and they are the final team. All right, guys, we have come to the end of the road. Thank you so much for watching this video. We just went through all 32 teams. It was a lot of fun. I was looking forward to doing this. We'll probably chop these up and spread them across the socials so that people can get our takes on each team. And final reminder, lockandcash.com/gridiron for the full season pass. NFL and college football last 3 years, up over 90 units to the green. And you'll get everything in this pass until there is a Super Bowl champion. Nothing will be left out. Every future, we've already released 7 of them. Every pick, every long shot, every sport is included as well. So lock in with us for the full season. It's down in the description, or check the link trees. And yeah, other than that, thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Let's get it.